Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we got another shop talk video. Now today's video is actually going to be a topic about me, basically kind of like my beginnings in this business as to far as where I'm at now and why I decided to go independent like I am today. So with that said, if you guys haven't subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button down below because it definitely helps the channel grow. And with that said, let's go ahead and start on today's topic. So basically where I started off, guys, was I went to UTI, and while I was at UTI I was working for a auto center, Sears Auto Center, if any of you guys are familiar with that. I did that for a number of years, and just me and the manager, right before I left, me and him just couldn't get along. We just had our disagreements. And time came to pass that we just weren't going to work there together, and one of us had to go. And unfortunately, I was the low guy in the totem pole. I was the one that had to leave. So my first automotive job, which was that auto center, I worked there for a couple years, and it was a good experience. It was a good learning environment. I got to learn quite a bit. However, I do feel that it was kind of a restricted environment too, because I really didn't do much of anything outside of batteries, oil changes, and tires. I worked there for a number of years, and I was promised to move up to Tech 2. I was a Tech 1. Tech 2s would do a little bit more suspension and brakes and things like that, but it just never came to happen. The management was always switching back and forth, and the next manager couldn't keep the promise of the previous manager, and so on. So kind of had to build rapport every single time that happened, which was pretty crappy to say the least. But after I worked there and I decided to, get out of there, I started working for a few independent shops. Now, I'm not going to sit there and name every single one, but these are pretty well-known franchise shops with big names out there that actually do a lot of advertising. So you guys may have them in your area as well. I worked at a few different shops. I kind of bounced around. I remember I worked for one company in particular where the shop had a bunch of different shops under the same brand name. He just franchised them. And I kind of moved around from one shop of his to the other, to the other, and to the other, kind of wherever he needed me. And I just kind of got sick and tired of that. I was always, kind of being passed around like, hey, I need you at this location. Take your tools and toolbox and go there. And I was never really with an at-home feeling, or I never felt at home, I should say, because my environment was constantly changing. And I did that for a couple years. Got me a lot of experience, to be honest with you. I want to say that job is kind of what taught me a majority of what I knew, because that guy would just throw me into the lion's den and not care. I remember my second week of being there, I never welded up an exhaust or bent up any muffler piping or anything, and I was just thrown in like, hey, take this pipe, you got to make this pipe for this car and weld it up and this and that. And I had to learn from scratch, and luckily there was a guy there, helping me out. But for the most part, it wasn't really the experience that you'd want to have, when you're starting off. I kind of had to go through the rough paces of it and figure it out on my own, even though I had just a tiny bit of help here and there. But after I got sick and tired of working in that environment, I decided to go ahead and work for a dealership. Now, my dealership story, guys, is kind of similar. I kind of bounced around. I mean, I worked almost every single franchise, and it's not a few of them, it's quite a bit. I've worked your Subarus, your Nissans, your Toyota dealers, your GM dealers. You pretty much think of it, and I've worked at it, unless it's some oddball thing like Bugatti or Lamborghini. Obviously, I haven't worked at any place like that, but I've had a lot of experience. Most of the dealerships that I worked with, again, most dealer groups will have more than one franchise. And I may start off working at a Toyota franchise, and then that owner or that manager would recommend me moving to their Lexus division or to their BMW division, and it was always kind of moving around for a while. For those of you that are in the Illinois area, you guys know that we have a lot of condensed dealers, and there's only about a certain handful of people that own them. So you can pretty much go within dealer groups, and switch up between, their Ford dealer or their Lexus dealer, vice versa. If you just, kind of mention it and put an app in, they're more than happy to usually move you around. Now, I did that for a couple years, bounced around. After that, I decided to work at a dealership that was actually a single dealer, that was independent, mom and pop, I guess you can say. It was franchised, but it wasn't a multi-franchise. It was basically a family-owned dealership. That place I hung out quite a bit at. It was a good experience. It was a small relative area. There was only about 10 or 15 techs. Everyone there was pretty friendly. Of course, not everyone is going to get along. I did have an arch nemesis here or there at that place as well. But I worked there for quite a few number of years, and after a few management changes and things of that nature, I saw that the management was always switching their words and lying. One manager would promise you something, and then the next guy comes in, and they don't know about it, they don't care. They're basically telling you, hey, you got to start from scratch with me because I'm new here. And I got tired of that. It was just, I was sick and tired of being promised one thing and not getting it. And then, even the times where I was promised something and I did wind up getting it, there would be some sort of shortfall on it. And a lot of you people may say, oh, Mike, stop being a crybaby, stop being a wuss, whatever, move on with it. But you got to remember, guys, when you go to work at a dealership and you start off as, let's say, entry-level tech, let's say as a lube tech or semi-skilled, and you're told, hey, for 6 months, if you show me great effort and you do this and you do that, I'll move you up to a journeyman, or I'll move you up to this or to that. You're kind of expecting to get that because when I was at a particular dealer, I'm not going to mention names, that's what happened. I came in, he's like, hey, I'll start you off as semi-skilled. Started off, he told me in about 4 or 5 months, let me see what kind of work ethic and skill you got, and I'll move you up. Well, I busted my hump. I mean, I was doing things like engines, transmissions, and rebuilding them, taking them in and out, like stuff that was even beyond the class of a semi-skill under a union pretense. And it didn't get me anywhere, guys. In the end, when I asked the same manager, like, hey, I've been working hard, I've been working as many hours as a journeyman, doing the same jobs as them, even to the point where I had a lot of journeymen hating me because I was taking their hours and I wasn't getting paid per book hour. I was getting a solid flat rate, so the shop was basically profiting. The management of the dealer group was making money off me here because they didn't have to pay a tech $35, $40 an hour. They were paying me, peanuts compared to that. I want to say I was getting paid like 15 bucks, which back then wasn't bad, but at the same time, for the amount of work I was doing and the type of work I was doing, it really wasn't enough, to be quite honest. But when I went up to that manager after, I worked a couple months of, showing him and everything, I kind of met his deadline. I was like, hey, you know what? I performed pretty good. I'm sure you can agree. And he's like, yeah, I definitely do agree. You're a good worker, a good hustler, this and that. He's like, you get stuff done. And I really, appreciate it and I like it. And I'm like, all right, well, if you remember when I came in, we talked about possibly moving up in a couple months. And he told me, he's like, oh yeah, that position hasn't opened up yet. It should open up in a couple months. Just keep doing your thing and, you're definitely in line. So again, I felt confident, worked at it a couple more months. That position actually opened up, believe it or not. And then I went up to him and I was like, hey, I'm ready if, you're ready, I want to move on up and obviously, do what I'm doing now and get paid more for it, obviously. And then he's like, unfortunately, we don't want to move anyone up. We're actually going to hire from outside the company. And I'll be honest with you guys, this thing kind of pissed me off here because I'm just going to say that this was a, let's say a Toyota dealership. And that's not what it was, guys, just as an example. Let's say I was working at Toyota, it was a Toyota dealership. They decided to hire an outside tech journeyman that came from, let's say, a Jeep dealership, instead of even sticking within the same brand. And they completely just didn't care about anyone underneath who was trying to move up and hired this outside guy who had never frankly worked on a Toyota per se. And I remember that guy was stumbling like, oh, this is small, this is that. Like he was kind of comparing himself working at, a Jeep dealer. And, just obviously things were a lot smaller, a lot different. And he was having a hard time adjusting versus me, a tech that had been doing it for a long time, for almost a year at this point, and I knew my way around these cars left and right, and I was doing all the work and producing the hours, and I never got my fair shot. And that honestly pissed me off to the point where I only worked there for about a year and I left. I just couldn't handle it. Now that we've talked about my prior jobs and experiences and things and pitfalls that I've experienced, I do want to say that it wasn't all negative. Towards the later years, I actually found myself in a good dealer group with a great manager. He was always looking out for everyone. He didn't pick favors or sides or anything, and he was just a really good guy overall. And I worked with him for a number of years. I started off right where I should have. I got all my promotions and my hourly rates corrected and everything as it was promised, and I was more than happy to work for him. It was a great experience. But as they say, all good things have to come to an end, guys. That manager basically decided to retire. He was getting older. He had been in the field for a while, and he got replaced. There was a new manager that came in. Now, in most dealership situations, when a new manager comes in and he takes over the service department, they do have a tendency to bring in a few people to help them out. It's not uncommon for them to bring in a couple new techs or a couple new people to help out as far as service advisors and things of that nature. But this manager was completely just changing everything, guys. We were a group of about 10 or 15 mechanics there that were fully fledged journeymen. And this guy was wanting to bring in about, I think it was 6 or 7 new mechanics. We had 7 groups of service advisors, all dealing with, X number of mechanics. And this guy was trying to bring in 1 new mechanic for every group, which, to be honest with you, I kind of saw what was going to happen early on. If he had brought in 1 for every group, there weren't enough racks in the building to support all these mechanics. So it meant 1 person from every group was going to get booted, or they were going to fire about 4 people or find reasons to let people go. And that's what wound up happening. The manager was starting slowly to fire people, and I came into the conclusion that he was basically firing the people that were there the least amount of time. And I want to say second to last or third to last of being there the least amount of time. And I kind of felt my time was coming up there. He was always trying to pick fights with me and argue, and could just come up to me and say, "Hey, you should have been done with this 5 minutes ago," and this and that. And my approach to him was always, "Hey, listen, you do what you do in your office, I do what I do in my office. It'll get done when it gets done." For me, it never made sense why my service manager was hassling me about something that me and my service advisor had talked about, and I knew I had plenty of time, or the expectancy for my service advisor wasn't even that day. It was, let's say, a week from that. And the straw that finally broke the camel's back with this, guys, and why I just had enough. I remember I was working on a vehicle. I basically got the car from the Loop Tech. They had upsold the brake job, and it had come to me. I wound up doing the brakes on it and everything, and I didn't do the oil change. It was a Loop Tech. Now keep in mind, this Loop Tech was one of the guys that had been hired by the new manager. And I do my thing, got everything done. Ship the car out, send it to the wash. Service advisor gets it, bills out the customer. Customer gets in their car, and apparently the wiper blades or something fell off and wound up scratching the windshield, just created all this panic. Now, it's pretty simple. I just did the brakes. The actual Loop Tech replaced the wiper blades, did the oil change, and everything. So anything that happened on his end, can't really blame me for, but unfortunately, yeah, you could blame me for it, according to my manager. He just told me that, hey, even if you didn't do it, you should have double checked it for the Loop Tech and this and that. And it just got to a point where I got really angry, and I was like, listen, man, I'm gonna inspect everybody's work, and if anyone drives out of here and has an issue, it's not the fault of whoever did the work, it's me because I touched the car last. I'm like, that makes no sense. I'm like, I can understand if a tire was off, because I should be able to not miss a tire about to fall off the car if someone didn't tighten it on there. But a wiper blade? Come on. How am I supposed to know he didn't clip them in and it was gonna, pop off? I'm like, that's not my fault. That's an issue with your guy, not mine. I did the brakes, that's all I focused on. And that wasn't good enough for him. He was just bickering with me and arguing, and I finally had enough, and I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. I have been through a lot of experiences in my life, guys, and I just know this to be a fact. If a manager is on your case and they're always picking on you or trying to find a problem with you, your time there is pretty much done, and it's almost up. They're gonna find a reason to in the end, so it doesn't even matter what you do. You can fight it, but it'll probably be an unpleasant work experience, and if you do wind up fighting it, the only way you can really win in that situation is, let's say, getting rid of that managing member that's giving you the issues, which I find is very difficult to do. So in the end, that was my last dealer experience. I just kind of felt it in the air. I was like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of this. I've been able to work and make good money, but there's always someone that's hassling me, and there's always some sort of issue with the evolving atmosphere within the dealer group. It's not like they leave the techs alone when a new management comes in. They just kind of want to change things up, and even the older guys working there get switched up a lot, where they have to start following new rules and new things. And I find that unfair, because if I worked at a dealership for 4 years and we always did things this way, and a new manager comes in and decides to 360 it, I'm not against doing what he wants to do, but if the old system isn't broken, why change it? You know what I mean? That's just always been my mentality. And like I said, at the end of the day, these guys are gonna put whoever they want on the chopping block and get rid of them, and bring in their own team and do it their own way, whether they're gonna be successful or not. And the kicker to the story, guys, is that I decided to leave right then and there. And about a week later, this manager actually got fired. And you know, it was already too late. I already had quit. I went back there, and you know, I talked to the new manager and I explained the situation to him. And then he's like, listen, he's like, my management style right now is actually going to be cutting people off. He was going to be firing people that this guy had hired and also letting go of some other tech. So he's like, we really have no use to rehire you. And at that point, guys, I mean, that was it. I kind of took a couple months off, and I told myself, what am I going to do from this point on? And then I was presented with a pretty good opportunity. So like I mentioned in the last clip, guys, opportunity presented itself. I was able to find a shop, which is currently the one that I'm in, that was available, and with the help of a few family members, I was able to acquire this place. And I started from scratch, guys. I'd always been a mechanic working in the back. I never really dealt with a lot of customers, although you'd see situations arise and you hear, you know, customers going off as service advisors. But I finally just had a moment of clarity, and I figured, you know what? I've worked for other people. There's always some sort of issue. Whether it's my fault or it isn't my fault, an issue will always be apparent, because when you work for people, you're under their control or under their rules. You can't really differentiate and do what you want to do. You're getting paid by them. You're going to do what they want. And seeing as how I've always saw the same issue happen and reoccurring, where as soon as you're good with someone or some management role people and they wind up changing, that everything switches up. So I told myself, I'm sick and tired of working for everyone. It's time for me to go out and do this myself. I acquired the shop that I'm in right now through the help of family members. And with their help, I started from scratch, guys. Literally all I had when I started this place was my toolbox. I didn't have any shop equipment or anything. And I didn't go crazy right away just buying everything. You know, it took time to amass, you know, like a tire machine, an AC machine, and things like that. I had to do things in an old school manner for the first couple of years, just because I couldn't afford to get everything that I wanted to get. You know, it takes time to build up a proper shop. But I'll be honest with you guys, it's the best decision I ever made. I'm more relaxed here, I guess you could say. I get to deal with customers directly. I get to work on the cars myself. If something were to go wrong, you know, since I work independently and by myself, I can only blame myself if something were to go astray. So, you know, it's kind of a nice feeling. At the same time, it also can be difficult, because sometimes you do need a second person to help you out. But, you know, so far, you know, I kind of know how much to bite off. I don't want to bite off more than I can chew. So typically I'll tell people like, hey, you know, it takes a couple days for me to do this job. Now, most shops may do that in a day or two because they got 3 or 4 guys working there. But I'll tell them like, hey, you know, if you can drop it off this day, give me a couple days. Normally I have buddies and friends that'll come and help me out, you know, and stuff like that. But for the most part, I've been, you know, very good and calm and very happy where I'm at. You get to be your own boss, and honestly, that's like the best thing you could ever do. Like I said, just working for people in this field, it's for some people, and for some people it isn't. I like knowing that I do what I do, and my customers can give me the positive feedback or negative feedback directly to my face, instead of me hearing it, you know, through the wind or anything, or, you know, getting it from a managerial position guy or something like that. I just like the direct connection. Although in the beginning it was tough, because I went from being just a mechanic who's never dealt with general public or customers, I should say, or dealing with parts vendors or anything, and I had to learn really quick, guys. You know, there's no slacking when it comes to this. I had to literally become a mechanic, service advisor, customer liaison, and parts person all overnight. I had to learn real quick, and luckily I've learned a lot of things throughout the years, and I was able to adapt really quick. I'm not gonna say that it was always easy, because the beginning of something is always the most difficult. But you know, now that it's been a few years and I'm pretty much in a comfortable state, I guess you can say, where my shop has everything that I need to do daily work on a daily basis. I'm quite happy, and you know, there's no looking back as far as, you know, any regrets of why I didn't stick here or didn't stick there. Of course, owning your own place does come with a lot of headaches as well. I mean, there's a lot of things like insurance and payments and all the stuff that you got to pay for that, you know, you didn't have before, a bunch of bills. When I used to work at a dealer, I'd go in 9 to 5, make my hours, and get paid at the end of the week. Versus here, you know, I got to do all the work, get paid, pay all the bills, get everything, you know, paid off, and then at the end, you know, I'm left with the, I guess you can say, the tidbits of it. But it's more rewarding than being under the control of someone or working for someone and always having to do it their way. I do it my way and it works for me, and I'll just say I love it. It's the best thing and the best decision that I ever made. This is just kind of a brief story, guys, I wanted to mention out there to kind of, you know, help you guys further know me a little bit more, so you guys can understand where I come from and how I got here. It wasn't an easy road by any means, but you know, I'm here thankfully, and I can't complain. So far so good. Hopefully this video will kind of help you newer generation mechanics out there, or people that are kind of going through what I went through when I was working at independent shops and all the dealerships, because it can be pretty rough, and they're all kind of universally the same thing. I don't think there's any state out there that doesn't have the same type of things. Whether you're in California or Florida or anywhere in the Midwest, I'm pretty sure you guys have relatable stories like this. If you have worked in a dealership or worked in the independent garage, you know, in any one of those states, I'm sure stuff like this has happened and happens quite normally for you guys. And you know, like I said, I just said I had enough of it and decided to venture off on my own. So with that said, guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed this shop talk, learning more about me. Please comment, like, and subscribe, because it definitely helps the channel grow. And with that said, I'll catch you guys on the next video, and until then, hope you guys have a wonderful day.